The House Transportation, Mobility, and Infrastructure Committee will come to order. Would the clerk please take attendance?
Chair Shannon.
Present.
Representatives McDonald.
Present.
Coleman.
Here.
Conlon.
Here.
Farhat.
Here.
Fitzgerald.
Here.
Hoskins.
Here.
Miller. Here. Outman.
Here.
Roth.
Here.
Bruck.
Present remote.
Koontz.
Present.
St. Germain.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have all members present. You do have a quorum.
Thank you. I need a motion to adopt minutes from last week, January 24th. Representative Outman makes that motion. Seeing no opposition, the minutes are adopted. So before we get started today, I do want to quickly ask my members that we keep all questions on topic and with regard to what our guests are presenting. So I thank you very much in advance for that. First up on the agenda is MDOT Acting Chief Engineer Operating Officer Greg Brunner, and MDOT Chief Administrative Officer Laura Mester presenting MDOT 101. So thank you so much for coming in. The floor is yours.
Good morning, representatives, and thank you for having us this morning. I'm Greg Brunner. I'm the Acting Chief Operations Officer and Chief Engineer for MDOT, and with me today is Laura Mester. She's our Chief Administrative Officer, and as mentioned, we're going to give you a little presentation on MDOT 101. We have about 20 slides here, and then we'll take any questions you have at the end. So, looking at our first slide here, we show our mission statement, providing the highest quality integrated transportation services for economic benefit and improved quality of life. And that presentation today focuses on quite a few of these topics. One of them is our integrated transportation systems. Lots of people think of MDOT as just operating our roads, but we're going to talk kind of all the modes that we're involved with and how they all work together. The economic benefits of transportation, and then just kind of some of the quality of life benefits for the folks of Michigan. So with that, the way MDOT's set up is we're divided into 7 regions around the state. Each of those regions has one central region office, and within the region, then there are what we call Transportation Service Centers, or TSCs. Since at MDOT we love acronyms, we call them TSCs. But each one of those is kind of strategically located around the state so that they're about an hour drive from anywhere you go. And the intent of those transportation service centers is to be the first and last point of contact for our customers with MDOT. These are the folks that are doing a lot of project management, the designing the project, constructing the project, and working with the locals kind of to get things done out there and meet their needs on anything transportation related. And then we do have 22 of these TSCs located around the state. Each one is managed by a professional engineer. And again, they want to be the first and last point of contact for our customers. More centrally located, we do have a central office in Lansing. They're more aimed at kind of overall expertise in highly technical areas, as well as a lot of the policy decisions that are made just to keep alignment through the department around the state. This is just a high-level org chart. As you can see right now, Brad Wiefrick is our acting director. We do have 3 deputy directors, Laura, Terry Slaughter, who's our Chief Culture, Equity, and Inclusion Officer, and myself as the acting operations officer, with different bureaus focused on finance, planning, bridges, field services, and then development. And a lot of times when you think of transportation, that's really what drives the economy in Michigan. When you start looking at just the borders in Michigan, you just think of kind of our 4 border crossings with Canada. But when you look at the overall borders between the U.S. and Canada, between New York to Maine, and also from Minnesota over to Washington, 35% of all trade runs through Michigan, just our ports and borders that cross. So that's pretty amazing when you look at the numbers compared to borderline miles across the U.S. When you look at freight, that's about $800 billion in freight is moved each year through all the modes in Michigan. Trucking accounts for the majority of that, with about 3/4 of it moved by truck. And everyone knows that Michigan is a tourism state as well. So visitors to Michigan spend about $26 billion annually, and those funds support about 230,000 jobs within the state. So from an economic standpoint, transportation is very important, but there are other modes as well that we work with. Bus transit adds about $900 million to the economy. Aviation's about $22 billion, and bicycling even adds a significant amount to the economy in terms of revenue, health, and other benefits. And now, when you start talking about the transportation system as a whole, though, we'd have to look at every mode that's out there. Think of yourself when you're traveling anywhere you go. You can use many modes to get there, whether it's driving to the airport, taking a plane, taking an Uber or a cab or a bus, and then walking the remainder of the distance. The important thing when you look at a transportation system is that all of these modes are working together to get people or goods where they need to go. And that's kind of what we focus on as a department. But as I had mentioned, a lot of people think of MDOT just for our roads and bridges. And when you start looking at Michigan as a whole, there's 122,000 road miles in the state. Those are operated by MDOT, counties, and municipalities. So this is kind of the combined numbers here. And that accounts for almost 12,000 bridges in the state as well. So kind of breaking those down, of course, MDOT handles some of them, county road commissions handle theirs, and then we have over 500 municipalities that manage some of the roads and bridges as well. But what we do to kind of coordinate all of that is there's a Transportation Asset Management Council in the state that's made up of representatives of state, counties, and local agencies. And what they do is they look at our assets as a whole so that we're comparing apples to apples when we're comparing ratings of the infrastructure, no matter who owns the agency, as well as working to implement asset management approach to maintaining those going forward. The other thing you may hear when it comes to roads and bridges is federal oversight. What that means is about a third of the roads in Michigan are federal aid oversight, so we can use federal funds for the construction of those to keep them going forward. The rest are state. I can go into that in a little bit more in a second here. But at a high level, that's where Michigan stands in terms of assets. 122,000 road miles and about 1,200 bridges. Or I'm sorry, 12,000 bridges. This breaks things down a little bit further. If you look at the pie charts on the top, 70% of the roads aren't federal aid eligible, 30% are. But those roads that are federal aid eligible, they account for about 96% of the current commercial traffic in the state and almost 90% of all traffic in the state. So those are the ones that see the majority of movement across Michigan. The lower pie charts show what MDOT's responsible for. And as you can see, MDOT's responsible for about 8% of all roads in Michigan. But on those roads, it's going to be our interstate, our M routes, and US routes, and I'll explain that a little bit in a second here. But those account for almost 3/4 of the commercial traffic and over 50% of all traffic around the state. And again, MDOT, of that 122,000 miles, MDOT's responsible for about 10,000. This just breaks down some of the things that MDOT is responsible for in terms of assets. When you think of MDOT roads, I know the general public doesn't realize if it's an MDOT road or a county road or a city road, and to be honest, they don't really care. They just want to get where they're going safely. So lots of the times at our TSCs or other places, we get calls about, if this is a county road, they have talked to so-and-so at the county to work through it. But what we are responsible for as a department are any of the roads, as you can see by the sign plaques on the left side that are M, US or interstate. Lots of those can even get confusing when you look at like Woodward in Detroit. That's actually M1. That's a state road. So again, overall, we know what the roads we're responsible for. The counties know the roads they're responsible for. But kind of at a high level, what we do, again, at MDOT, it's about 10,000 miles, almost 5,000 bridges, 82 roadside parks, 77 rest areas. And we do the planning, design, construction, operations, maintenance, and permitting of those roadways. Lots of the questions we get are related to construction and maintenance on those. When it comes to construction, these are all federal aid eligible roads. We use a low bid system. So what happens is we develop a set of construction plans, put it out to bid, and then the contractors, whoever has the lowest bid, is the one that's awarded the project. That's just the process we follow to be federal aid eligible. And of course, we can't do that alone, just the amount of workload that's out there. We do use private consultant services for quite a bit of the work. As you can see by the stats on here, it's right around or just over half for either designing the construction projects or overseeing the construction projects in the field. Again, an important part of MDOT, though, is we keep that expertise in-house just so that we are, if a consultant sends us a set of design plans or whatever else, we have the expertise in-house to be able to review it and make sure things are good to go. But again, that's how we work together with them to deliver our large program that we have. When it comes to maintenance, this is another thing where Michigan's a little bit different than any other state in the country in terms of who performs maintenance. When you look around the country, many of the states either have the Department of Transportation perform all maintenance, or they hire county road commissions to perform maintenance on the roadways. So we're blessed that we have the best of both worlds. We have counties that perform maintenance on MDOT roads in 63 of the counties, and then MDOT direct forces that do it in the remaining 20. And we also have about 170 municipal contracts where municipalities maintain the roadways within in their jurisdiction. Beyond that, we do some private contracts for maintenance, such as in the city of Pontiac. We have a freeway lighting contract in Metro Detroit. And then more specialized services like our intelligent transportation system, which is all our cameras and dynamic message boards, those types of high-tech things. We have a separate contract to be able to maintain those out in the roadway. The other big thing we deal with is bridges and border crossings that I kind of talked about in terms of commerce previously. And this is just a breakdown of all the crossings that are in Michigan, and kind of just for your understanding who owns them and operates them. Starting in the top left, we have the International Bridge in Sault Ste. Marie. That one's operated by an international authority between the U.S. and Canada. But MDOT's involved from an HR and budget management standpoint there. The Mackinac Bridge also has their own independent authority, but MDOT's involved in human resources and budget management there. The Blue Water Bridge is a little bit different. MDOT owns out to the middle of the bridge. Canada owns from the middle to the other side. So we deal quite often with them in terms of maintaining the bridge, keeping things operational and going forward. The Ambassador Bridge in Detroit is privately owned and operated. And then we also have the Detroit-Windsor Tunnel, which is municipality owned but privately operated in Detroit. And I'm sure many of you are aware, we also have the new Gordie Howe Bridge that's currently being constructed between the U.S. and Canada in Detroit. That one has an independent international authority and Canadian human resources and budget responsibilities as part of the project agreement there when that one opens up. So lots of different crossings and lots of different scenarios in the state. The next thing that's important from a modal standpoint is also our non-motorized transportation program. That involves sidewalks and independent paths around the state. And you may not know, but we actually do have dedicated bike routes in Michigan as well. 3 of them. The plaque shown there is Bike Route M20, or Bike Route 20, I'm sorry, that follows M20 kind of across the middle of the state, biking all the way across. The one question I get quite a bit when I was in a transportation service center was we'd be installing a new non-motorized path somewhere, and the question we get from the public is, how come you're building this bike path when the road next to it's in rough shape? But just for your information, it's part of Act 51, which will be talked about later. We dedicate 1% of our funds to non-motorized, so that's kind of why we do them as part of that. And Laura's going to talk about Act 51 a little bit later in the presentation.
So what I'll be talking about is our other modes of transportation. And one of the big differences with our modes versus our highways and bridges is MDOT is not normally the asset owner of the modes. First up, we have our transit and passenger transportation, and we have more of a facilitation role to help them plan and then pursue federal funding, and we provide a lot of operating assistance through the Act 51 formula. A lot of grants are available to our urban agencies, and then we more facilitate on behalf of the rural transit agencies, and that is because of our relationship with the Federal Transit Agency. One of the things that we'll be talking about going forward is, with the pandemic, the number of passengers was reduced quite significantly, and people are learning to use transit in new ways. But based on the number that, we don't have our 22 numbers yet because the agencies are in the reporting phase, we're expecting that passenger trips will go up to 41 million, and which is a good increase. I don't believe it's quite back up to pre-pandemic levels, But one of the things that our transit agencies did do, they were very resilient during the pandemic, and instead of having passengers, they became in some ways delivery services. And so as we explore with the Federal Transit Administration, what are some of the things and where is transit going for the future? We also have 5 contracted intercity bus routes, and this is about connectivity, allowing long-distance buses to pick up people in rural areas and get them either to metropolitan areas in Michigan or even across the country where they can connect with other modes like an Amtrak train or another bus system that could take them to their destination if the other modes of travel such as airplanes or rail is not an option for them. Like passenger transportation, aviation, we help facilitate all the federal grant management and pass resources through. We have a regulatory oversight responsibility for airport inspections as well as pilots and licensing pilots. This too was an area that was hit by the pandemic, but we expect that passengers, and as you could see recently in the news with the airlines, there's a lot of passengers that are back to flying, and we expect over 40 million of those types of passengers as we go along. Some of the things that we'll also be talking about, it will be the unmanned aerial services and systems and how that is impacting airspace, mobility issues or delivery issues, I should say, as well as PFAS, and partnering with the Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy to talk about their regulatory responsibility and how that is impacting our airports in particular, because they have traditionally had to use substances that include that chemical, and there's been a direct impact on them. Our marine transportation, while we don't have a great deal of resources that are provided for marine transportation, they are a significant part of our freight network, moving goods and commodities, especially those of heavy weight. And we're working with them for freight resources and matching up some of their needs with what we have available either through our Comprehensive Transportation Fund or on the federal level. During the IIJA, there was a lot of investment into marine assets, and so we're trying to help facilitate that and provide those resources, as well as an avenue for those private owners of the ports to be in contact with either the federal government or working internally within Michigan to get them resources. And as many of you may know, this new SULAC, they continue to work on that project, and I believe I read recently that Congress has fully funded that project and expected to be completed by 2028, and that is a very significant transportation asset as it relates to our freight and delivery of goods, and there's a lot of dependency here in Michigan on the commodities that come through that lock. We have a couple issues or a couple topics related to rail transport. One is our freight, and the other is our passenger rail. There's 36,000 miles of privately owned and maintained rail. We work closely with the 4-class railroads and try to work with them to identify investments, and we have a number of loan programs and grant programs that not only the Class 1 railroads but the short lines have available to them, and it's really about economic benefit and, again, moving heavier commodities off of our roads and bridges and putting them either in rail or marine. We did see an uptick in the number of passengers that we had on Amtrak, again, because of the pandemic. the line was shut down, but we are seeing an increase. We almost up to 600,000 in '22, and we continue to work with Amtrak on reliance and timely delivery between Dearborn and Chicago, so that passengers that want to take that mode of transportation can trust that they're going to get them to any of those destinations along that line when they need to and when they want to. We, the state of Michigan, do own 665 miles of state-owned rail, but this is one of the areas that we continue to talk to our short lines and others about, the ownership. And given the way that the operating agreements work between all of the railroads, and just making sure that we have efficient services and that it's meeting the needs of the customers along those lines as well as the railroad companies and providers. So this is a very, very busy chart, and this is the Act 51 distribution formula. For many of you who might not be familiar with it, it's been amended many times, but I believe the note that I received from our staff is that there's 697 ways to distribute transportation funding out of Act 51. The main one is MDOT receives 39.1%, the counties receive 39.1%, and the cities and villages receive the remaining 22.8 or 1. I can't do math, and I'm the CPA. Good Lord. But it is a way that, over the years, there are set-asides within this, but it provides the distribution of those resources that, as Greg had mentioned, there's a number of other users and asset owners that rely on these funding sources. And for fiscal year '23, this is the estimates that, working through the Department of Treasury, in which our fiscal year '23 was based on, it's made up of registration and title tax, gasoline tax, diesel fuel, and then we have the dedicated income tax that was passed back in 2015 of $600 million, and then the marijuana tax. And of course, then we also receive a significant amount of federal aid, which supports all of our road and bridge construction and technology projects. And this is the expected distribution that we have. And the one thing that I'd like to mention about our federal aid is in accordance with Act 51, MDOT gets 75% of the federal aid, and the local roads receive 25%. And one of the things that we worked on last year with the other asset owners is the federal buyout provision that allows for some of those communities that don't deal in federal aid and have to understand the compliance requirements, and so that they don't lose federal funding. This is an ease to the administrative burden for them. And this is a snapshot of what MDOT accomplished in 2022. It was one of our biggest investment years, $3 billion in highway program investments. We do a calculation on the number of jobs that it creates as a result of those investment levels, and we figure the formula essentially is for every $1 million, it creates 12.1. And we were very busy last year with the IIJ coming out and the number of reconstruction projects that we had on the table, along with our rehab and maintenance. It's a very busy slide, but it is something that we at Transportation are very proud of, and that partnership that we have with the other asset owners, and then trying to address the needs of the public from a motoring and mobility and access perspective. It's money well spent on the things that we do here in Michigan. And then finally, just for your information, if there's, we have a lot of media and information that we try to make what we do transparent and accessible to the public, either through Facebook, Twitter. I don't use that, so I don't know how to say it. YouTube, and of course, we provided our org chart with all of the phone numbers for our leadership team, and we'll always be available to answer questions, working with Troy and Jeff Cranston. And then finally, we wanted to just, provide, this is who MDOT is. And, the one thing that I hope comes clear is that we're a very diverse department in the roles and responsibilities that we have. But it really is about serving the citizens and making sure that people can get where they need to go in a safe and efficient manner.
Well, thank you so much for your presentations. If you have some time, we do have a few questions. I'll start. One thing I did want to highlight is that thank you for bringing it to our, to the committee's attention that we're not just roads and bridges, right? There are so many different aspects to the Transportation Committee and what you guys do with regard to aviation, with marine, with rail. So it's not just, I think we get focused a lot on just it being about roads. And so making it clear to the committee members that there are, this committee does tackle other issues with different modes as the term that you are using. I do have a question, but we have a few questions. This one's a little bit broader, so I'll ask a real simple question. You brought up the Gordie Howe Bridge. What's the expectation for when that will be done?
Right now, we're working on, with the contractor and the WDBA, which is the Canadian firm on that. The current completion date is late 2024, early 2025.
Okay, so coming up in a few years. Excellent.
I think right now, just from where it's at, the towers, I don't know if you're familiar with the layout. I know I showed it a while back, but if I can bring that slide up.
Yep.
Overall, it's on the bottom right. It's a cable stay bridge is what it looks like, so it's a little different than anything we have in Michigan right now. Those towers, when they're done, they're going to be about 722 feet tall, so it's going to be higher than anything in Detroit, the landscape. Right now, I think they're right around 600 feet now, so they're still going up and continuing to build the bridge. So it's quite a project.
It is, and very exciting. So we'll go ahead and go to questions, and we'll start out with Representative Kuntz.
Greg, thank you for coming today, both of you. That was very informative. We had talked about price, and I'd like to talk about value. Is there a warranty when we build a road? Do we go back to this construction people and say this didn't hold up? Or is there some point we can go in the future? Is that addressed somehow in the bid process? And could you explain it, please?
Yep. Different types of projects have different warranties. That's set up actually by law that we include warranties there. So again, it's going to be aimed more at materials and workmanship warranties for kind of reconstruction type or heavy repair type projects. Some of our more capital preventive maintenance projects have more performance warranties where it has to performs so well for so long. We do have a warranty database where we keep track of those things when we do include them in construction contracts, where it's up to our folks to go back out and review the warranties to make sure they're completed. And then if needed, the contractor comes in and performs corrective action. So yes, we do. And again, we're just following the warranty law that's out there.
Thank you.
Representative Roth.
Yep, thank you, guys. I appreciate you being here. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. Marine, I'm glad you brought up Marine. I'm channeling my inner Jack O'Malley. Did we get that done, the $5 million deposit into the Marine portion of the MDOT area? Do we know if we got that done or not?
I believe we did.
I thought we did, but I wanted to confirm that, so we did. I got to know.
Gotten the $5 million appropriation. We have the
Oh, the
policy
office,
side of it
yep.
done, but we have not gotten the appropriation.
Okay. Thank you, Troy. I appreciate that, guys. Yeah, I want to highlight that because that is my Northern Michigan district, obviously, and it is a part that we have neglected for too long. I don't think it was intentionally done, but we just need to make sure we focus on that coming forward. So I appreciate that, guys.
In the meantime, one of the things that we are working in using federal funds, freight funds, to also see if they're available in helping the port owners get access to some of those resources. Because I know we worked with a couple, and if we could have a follow-up, we could have those that are in that area come and speak specifically to you about what's going on with freight and how it impacts water. And I apologize. I thought we had the 5 million, but I'm think it's the federal funds.
Got it. Thank you.
And I will say, Representative Roth, I remember the presentation that we had last term, and it did seem like it was very important. So would love to bring that back up, and we can have a discussion offline of how we proceed with that. Yeah. Representative Farhat.
Thank you, Chair Shannon. I have two questions, and one of them has to do with the current costs associated with repairing, replacing, and our roads and infrastructure throughout the state. I'm assuming there's been an increase as we've seen prices go up drastically. Has MDOT been able to still find and service all its projects on time and also afford the cost increases that have been happening right now?
Yeah, we can speak to the cost increases. Since kind of last summer, when we look at the bids, we do bid lettings every month where we let projects out. Since then, we've seen about a 17% increase in prices. So again, that's a significant amount. Looking at the bottom dollar and trying to keep things balanced. Up to this point, we've continued to deliver everything that we promised going forward, and we're kind of making those assessments now from letting to letting on where things stand. Being mindful of that bottom line dollar, but as you mentioned, yes, prices have gone up everywhere. I know I went to buy a dozen eggs and had sticker shock, but that's kind of across the board and what we're seeing in all construction materials that are out there. And then we continue to work with industry on that to do the best we can to keep things moving forward.
Certainly.
We're also pursuing discretionary grants to help pay for some of those projects, especially if there's of significance, like we received for I-375. And then looking at it, we do have a 5-year program, so that allows us to shift as we see costs coming up, going down. It allows us to move our program around also.
Sure, awesome, thank you. Yeah, and you mentioned earlier from Dearborn to Chicago. I've never personally taken that train, but that is from my district, so that is awesome to hear that. Another project too is the Miller Bridge that we recently started working on. So that's why I was wondering if there's been any increase in cost there as related to that. And as a follow-up, has there been, with Public Act 51 being structured the way it is, and then this is just a more broader funding and revenue question, right? Has the department started thinking about potential other sources that may come and approach this committee or others to look up and consider to help with either decreasing gas tax revenues because they shift more to EVs, or towards a different model altogether? Has the department ever had this kind of conversations or something they'd like to present to this committee? I know now may not be the time, but just high level.
Well, yes, and not only is the state of Michigan looking at what are alternatives, but also on a national level.
Sure. Because
the Highway Trust Fund also faces insolvency, which is propped up with the general fund at the national level. There's a number of studies that are ongoing in other states that are looking at mileage-based user fees. With that is something that we will have to pursue, and I'm sure there will be a number of conversations and opportunities to talk about how do we address, as we modernize vehicles, the impact on gas tax, and as gas consumption goes down, how do we pay for roads and bridges and other transportation? And we've talked about it, but we're not fully invested into, hey, this is how to fix the problem.
Yeah. Again, coming from Southeast Michigan, the problem has always been kind of funding, right? And figuring out first whose road is it, who do we call, and then funding, right? So I appreciate that perspective, and I'm good for now. Thank you, Chair Shannon.
Well, thank you so much. I guess I have one last thing, just for something that may come in future, into the future. Maybe have you guys come back at some point, because the transportation, this committee has been renamed to Transportation, Mobility, and Infrastructure. And so I think the committee would be interested to hear what challenges or issues face MDOT with the advent of EVs. But that's something that we, maybe look at coming up in the next several months.
And that's as part of that IIJA, or the federal infrastructure law that came out. You may have heard about the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure, what we call NEVI, because we like acronyms again, funding. But we do have a plan for that. I think Michigan's getting about $105 million towards EV infrastructure. So we have a plan already set up on how to roll that out. Now we're working through that was required in order to be eligible for the funding. Now we're working kind of through more of the details on how to actually get it done.
So that's something that we could look forward to seeing in the future, and maybe having you come back to discuss that.
Yep.
Okay, great. Seeing no other questions, we do have a couple other presentations. So for the time being, we will go at ease. The Transportation, Mobility, and Infrastructure Committee will come back to order. Next up, we have Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson and Attorney General Dana Nessel, and they are going to give a presentation on some issues in their specific departments. So thank you so much for joining us today, and I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Representative, and thank you for having us here. The Attorney General, as well as one of my chief legal counsels, Keela Crane, are here with me today to really talk about the Road to Restoration clinics that we've been having all throughout our state. So we want you all to know about how we've worked to make real the laws passed to ensure people have the tools and resources they need to drive safely in our state, and how sometimes when you pass laws enabling the restoration of driver's licenses, for example, it falls upon us and our departments to make those real for citizens and make sure people know about them. And that's what the Road to Restoration program has really done. And it's been a partnership between my office and the Attorney General's office that was really the brainchild and fully executed by Keela Crane from my staff who's here today. So I wanted to let them also tell you more about the program and their work, because we see a true partnership coming forward, and it's all, a reaction to the laws that you all have passed and have come through this committee. Before that, I'll briefly just give you an update on our customer service operations, which also fall under your jurisdiction. And as you know, as you may know, there have been many changes over the last several years, and we hope to make more with your partnership and help in the years ahead. So when I took office in my first term, we all know this, I used to joke that I run the DMV, which makes me terribly popular in the state of Michigan, which isn't actually the case, but we work to recognize, and I visited every branch office in our state in my first 100 days in office and saw unacceptable lines and real inefficient services. So we took notes and we made changes where now office visits are 20 minutes or less on average. People can either walk up and request a scheduled slot so they know exactly when they'll be seen, or they can schedule their visit ahead of time. We have an abundance of available scheduled spots on any given day, and I receive updates every week to ensure that's the case in every office. I'll also be visiting our branches beginning this week, doing a tour around the state to ensure and meet with our staff in every branch to ensure they have direct line of communication to me and my team in continuing to make improvements. In addition to that, we saw in branches that a significant number of people there didn't have to be there. And a lot of our laws have not been updated over the last few decades to actually enable what other states have, which are a lot of services online or without requirements of in-person transactions. And so one of the ways we've created a more successful climate in our department is to where we started with 28% of our transactions happening outside of offices. Now 58% of transactions happen outside of offices, which dramatically decreases the traffic in the offices to begin with, also enabling those smoother services for people who do show up. And we've worked to update our online services to enable that. We've also updated our kiosks or self-service stations to enable less people to need that in-person service in branches. What that means is, when I first visited every office, we noticed we had 93 kiosks all throughout the state, and on any given time, at least half of them were broken, or if not more. None of them accepted cash, and there was a really inefficient system for even ensuring that paper was put in them when the paper ran out. So they weren't working, and they were a waste of money for the state. So we implemented, in partnership with colleagues, or talking with colleagues in other states, 160 new self-service stations at no cost to the state. Most of them are located at grocery stores because now they can be fixed by the company themselves, not by state staff. And so when they break down, a message goes to the company and they get fixed usually within 24 hours. So they're usually operational. They're open evenings and weekends. The average transaction is just 2 minutes. Many of them accept cash. All are multiple languages. So it's just a better and more efficient system that means people are using it. So less people are going to branches if they don't have to. And the other thing we saw, apologies for the emoji, the other thing we saw really after the pandemic, when we worked to sort of sit back and say, how can we make sure the capacity of our offices are meeting the needs of our residents, was we had, at any given point, over 100 vacancies. So oftentimes people would walk into a branch and see only 2 positions, 2 stations filled, because, and I'd go to a branch and say, what's going on? And it was, well, we have 2 vacancies, or we have 3 vacancies. So we filled those vacancies, and we've been filling them since then. I'm proud that we've gone from about 120 to just under 20 to 25 vacancies. We get updates again every week because people leave, people are promoted to manager, so there's all changes. But we've hired over 100 new staff over the last year, and that has also enabled us to really bring fresh faces and energy as well as full staffing to our offices. So that hiring and those improved working conditions have made staff happier and have translated into better customer service for those who actually do come to our branches. As a result, where 4 years ago the average rating by visitors was 2.5 stars, we're now at 4 stars and above. And I think I would encourage you and would be happy to join you to visit a branch in your district, and we can kind of talk with the staff and you can hear directly from them about the changes. So briefly, I just want to say the next steps moving on from that are really threefold. One, 70% of our branch transactions, the transactions that are actually happening in branches now, are title transfers. And so Indiana, Illinois, a few other states actually create the ability for some titles to be transferred online or virtually, as opposed to requiring an in-person transaction. Updating the law to enable us to allow that as well would also dramatically decrease the number of people who have to physically go to a branch and increase efficiency for the transfer of vehicles for our residents all throughout the state. So really one of our top legislative priorities for this sector of our office is creating the opportunity for online title transfers. And we're happy to work with your staff along with the auto dealers and others throughout our state to communicate both how this should be an easy update for us to do. We can talk with other states who do it. And we're not talking about all titles because some will require in-person transactions, but the vast majority can be updated to not require that. And that will significantly smooth operations of our office. The other next step that we would like to implement and that we've already started are mobile branches. Our office believes strongly, as you'll hear from our restoration clinic model, of meeting people where they are. Because oftentimes government says, come to where we tell you to come, and then you can do your services with us. But we know the model, particularly for our senior citizens, for young citizens, and for highly transient populations or homeless populations or others, not everyone has the ability to come to where the government says you need to go for a transaction. Our mobile offices meet people where they are. And in particular, my hope would be to have a mobile office at least one day a month at every senior center in our state, so that people know on that day every month, all they have to do is go out right outside their development, and there's going to be a mobile office right there. We'd also like to see them visit libraries and other parts throughout the state. And we already have 3 mobile offices in the field. We'd like to get 7, and that's what we're asking support to do. The mobile offices are basically a branch office in a vehicle, and they provide almost everything that a branch office does to those who come up to them, but they reduce the need for a trip to a separate branch office, particularly for our less mobile residents. We right now have a mobile office in Central Michigan, West Michigan, and Southeast Michigan. I'd like to see at least 1, if not 2, in the Upper Peninsula, because rural communities, I think in particular, could benefit from these types of services, as well as Northern Michigan. And again, the thing I'd like to communicate to all of you is these are your constituents that we could better serve through these offices. And they are not really expensive. We've already got the infrastructure to do them. We just need additional funding to hire the staff to staff them. So would love to work with you on that. And again, with 4 more mobile offices, we could ensure every senior center in this state, including those in your district, every shelter, other places, libraries have that access. And as you'll hear from our driver's restoration clinics, that access can be key to making the laws that you passed real for every citizen in our state. And so with that, I want to, I'll turn it first over to the Attorney General to talk about the road to restoration. Well, actually, Keila, if I could turn it over to you first, because this was really your brainchild, and then Dana, if I could ask you to add anything. But I think, Keila has done an extraordinary job of creating these clinics and working with both departments to make them real. And if you could say a few words about that.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Secretary. Good morning to you all. I'm Keela Crane, the Deputy Legal Director for the Secretary's Office. And as you all know, you passed a law, the Clean Slate to Drive bill, which helped to reduce some of the less severe driving infractions and move them to civil infractions, and also reduced some of the penalties that are subscribed to them. And what we did is we wanted to make sure that all of our residents would understand what the impact would be for the Clean Slate to Drive when it came into fruition in in October of 2021. And so we have traveled to 18 different clinics in 11 states across this, 11 cities across the state to meet, as Secretary Benson stated, our residents where they are. This has have been a great private government partnership. We have worked with our friends at DTE, as well as Miller Canfield Law Firm, the Detroit Justice Center, and the Michigan Association of United Ways all across the state to meet our citizens. And we bring volunteer attorneys, we bring the Department of the Attorney General's office, and the Attorney General herself has been so gracious to attend many of our clinics. And we invite our residents to come and see us. The mobile branches that the Secretary was just talking about are also at each of our clinics so that all of our residents who are able to restore their driving privileges can go right to our clinics. They will be able to pay their restoration fee and then take the test if they need to take a test. They're getting one-on-one information from members of our colleagues at the Department of State, and if they need to see a volunteer attorney, they're able to do that as well. In the second half of our clinics that we did between the summer and the fall of 2022, we were able to invite some of the district courts in the various cities that we attended as well. And if residents had issues with the district courts, they were able to go up to that district court representative. If they needed to pay a fine or fee, they were able to do that there as well. One of the things that we would like to speak with many of you all about is that while the Clean Slate to Drive law was tremendous for many of our residents, there's other steps that need to be taken because some of our residents just are having difficulty with some of the punitive nature of our driving-related laws, and they can't afford to pay some of the fines or fees, as the Attorney General will tell you more about. And then some of our residents have issues around DUIs. And we want to make sure, of course, that we're putting safe people on the road, but we also recognize that in too many instances, people can maybe not afford an attorney to go see to help them go through that process. And so we're trying to bring, as the Secretary stated, the government to the people to help them understand what their process is and what their actual road is to restore their driving privileges if they're able to do so. So it was a great honor to be able to do this. It's one of many of the Secretary's initiatives to bring people to government instead of, or bring the government to people, instead of having people come to us. So I'll turn it to the Attorney General to talk a little bit more. Thank you, Madam Secretary.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having us here today. And I'm not here with an independent agenda for the Department of Attorney General. I'm really here just to support the Secretary's Road to Restoration programming. It's some of the best programming that I've ever seen offered by state government. And I will say this after having spent my entire career in courts around the state, often as a prosecutor, but often as a defense attorney, defending people, representing people who had lost their licenses or who, because of various different driving-related infractions and sometimes crimes, became ineligible to drive. I will tell you, this affects a person in every way you can possibly imagine when they do not have the legal ability to drive. Obviously, it affects their income, their ability to have certain jobs and upward mobility. It affects their ability to take their child to the doctor's office, to go grocery shopping. Really, the list goes on and on. You can imagine. And what it does oftentimes is it really just leads people, frankly, to drive illegally. And that is dangerous. That's not good for anyone. It leads to unnecessary cases of fleeing and eluding. And also you have a person who has not gone through the regular mechanisms to make sure that they can legally drive, and that includes driver's tests and making sure that their vision is good, and all the other things we want if we're going to have somebody who is on the road. And I think the important thing to remember is for the bulk of these people, we're not talking about people who lost their license because they were poor drivers and they posed a safety risk. More often than not, it's a person who couldn't afford to pay a ticket or a fine, and as a result, their driver's license was suspended. And then if they were caught driving again, that was an additional year, and it just added up and up and up. And for many people, through the process of accruing fines and court fees, I mean, these were individuals who were never going to be able to get their license back, and again, affected their lives in an untold number of ways. So the fact that the legislature passed laws that allowed for some 300,000 people to regain their licenses was incredibly impactful for so many people. And then it was these clinics that allowed for so many people to come in, many of them to leave that day with a driver's license. And it was just incredible. If you have not experienced it, I really urge you to go to one of these clinics, because you will never see government operating in a way that helps people more so than you will see at the Road to Restoration clinics. Just so it's clear, in terms of the mechanics of the Department of Attorney General and our role, the Department of Attorney General represents the state in driver's license restoration cases in Wayne, Oakland, Macomb, Washtenaw, and Grand Traverse counties, which represents about 45% of Michigan's population. And the remainder of those cases are handled by county prosecutors at the request of the Attorney General, and with additional agreements that we have to support those offices' efforts. So we do attend all of these fairs. We do have an expert attorney that is there to lend assistance. And as I said, I'm always bugging Keela and going to as many of these events as I can possibly get to, because it really is magnificent to be able to assist someone, especially so many people who for years and years and years they went without a driver's license, and to see how it opens up entire new worlds for them in ways that you can't imagine. So I'm so supportive of this program, and I'm happy to be here today in support of it.
Well, thank you so much for your presentations. I really appreciate you joining us today. I do have a question or two, and once again, committee members, just get the attention of either our vice chairs or Dakota, and she will get you down on the list to ask a question. First up is Minority Vice Chair Outman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Madam Attorney General, Madam Secretary Keela. Thank you for being here today to present to us. In terms of the Road to Restoration, I have a couple of questions for you. And you touched on this a little bit. I think Madam Attorney General touched on this a little bit. But what are the violations that are covered under this new law?
Do that, Keela.
So, thank you, Madam Attorney General. So there's about over 100 different violations that we have identified at the Department of State that are covered in some form or fashion. Either they were moved from misdemeanors to civil infractions, or they were able to eliminate the reinstatement fee. But we've identified over 100. One of the ones that we would need, if I may, Madam Secretary, clarity about is the no proof of insurance. Because there are two separate laws that intertwine that penalize people who do not have proof of insurance. One is in the insurance law, obviously, and then one is in the motor vehicle code. And the way that the law is written allows for the interpretation that it may not actually apply to no proof of insurance. So if we can, with Madam Secretary's permission, to work with you all to bring some clarity to that. That dramatically impacts so very many people, especially in places like Wayne County, where the cost of insurance makes it really prohibitive for many people to be able to have a valid license.
Mm-hmm. I look forward to working with you guys on that. And additionally, on the Road to Restoration, you guys mentioned these clinics that you've kind of put throughout the state. What were the location of those 11 clinics, and how many people approximately have you helped so far?
Attorney General, do you?
I don't have those numbers.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Making sure that I am deferring to the principals here. So we went to Alpena, Traverse City, Ypsilanti, Lansing. We went to Grand Rapids twice. We went to Detroit 4 times. We went to Muskegon twice as well, and Benton Harbor. Pontiac, and Flint. That was between November of 2021, which we did a pilot in Detroit, and November of 2022.
Oh, very
And we
good.
saw over 4,000 residents during that 1 year period.
Oh, terrific. Well, thank you all for your work on this. It's vital that we help people get their license back so they can, provide income for their family and be productive members of society. So I appreciate you guys' work on this. Thank you.
And if I could just add to that as well, I think one of the things you want to communicate to you and ask for your help communicating to your colleagues is these are your constituents, these are your residents that we want to make sure they have access to the laws that you're passing. And so if there is a location, our ability to do these clinics rely on partnerships on the ground, churches, other places of worship, or other community centers that open up their doors to help us have this space. So if you would like us to have these in a community or want to work with us in any place throughout the state, would love to develop that collaboration, because really they have been possible because people on the ground and community organizations have worked with us to make them happen.
And I will add lots of volunteer attorneys. And the reason why that's so important is because while our department can lend some advice and guidance, because we are the ones who are actually representing the state in the event that there's a challenge, we really do need to have volunteer attorneys that are the ones that are there actually helping to process these individuals. And I know in some areas that's been more of a challenge than other areas. We always do our best to find lawyers, and fortunately we do have a lot of pro bono attorneys out there that have been willing to drive to locations that are far away from them in order to assist. But I would say that has been one of the challenges that we've had, although we try to address it every time.
And thank you so much. Just to add to what Representative Outman was talking about, I see that that DTE Energy is a partner in this, and so I'm assuming that the business community is behind this because they want to be able to get their workers to work. And so it's a great program. And our next question comes from Representative Conlon.
I think you probably answered it, but I was wondering, how do we let more people know about this program? And it sounds like we need to locally drive that with having more, I think you're calling them fairs. Is that what we call them? Exactly. And I don't know how we get that word out better, that they're even existing, to get more. Because how many people do we think, you said 4,000 have benefited? Do you have any idea of how many people are out there that could benefit from this?
I'm sure thousands more. And that said, we welcome, and this is the work of one staffer in our deputy chief legal counsel, but one, and so the more I'm sure if you had more people and support and resources to help us expand it even more, we'd love to. And I think we already have pilots and models in place to be able to plug and play all throughout the state if we have partnerships available, and then using those partnerships to get the word out. But what we've seen essentially is that with minimal resources and minimal staff allocation in terms of time, and a lot of work that has really been done through the leadership of Keila and her team, we've done a great deal. And so imagine how much we could do more of if we invested in the program and expanded it more. It certainly, there's no limit to what, the program itself can be expanded in multiple ways. And that's what, would love for your help and support to be able to do.
Yeah, and just to add to that, again, there are approximately 300,000 people in the state that now are eligible to get their driver's license back. So that's 4,000 that the clinic was able to serve, but there's so many more people who could benefit from this with better resources.
Representative McDonald. I'm sorry, Majority Vice Chair McDonald. Oh, I have you on the list. Sorry about that. Okay, any other questions? No other questions. Thank you so much for presenting. We're going to see if we can't get one in Macomb County. So thank you for the information, and everyone have a great day.
Thank you so much.
And there being no objection, and there be no further business before the committee will stand adjourned.